Employers and managers who had to fire their best employee. What happened? Had a guy who'd work his butt off daily in putting data into spreadsheets. Would come in, put in solid hours of actual work, not goofing off. He would literally get 4 times as much stuff done in a week as anyone else in the office. After 3 weeks straight of this, other people start to take notice and occasionally ask him to help them out when they're behind. And he obliges. This gets worse and worse. And eventually people are basically just walking all over him while they spend all day Facebooking and whatnot because he won't say no if they ask him to help with their work. The dude just keeps trucking through though. About 4 months into working there, it's gotten to the point where you can hear the extra mean girls talking about leaving early and not getting in trouble because, quote, he'll just do all the work for us if we ask anyway. Well, the guy goes into the boss's office and I work right next to it so I can hear more or less the entire conversation. I'm paraphrasing, but it went something like this. I would like a raise. I'm doing way too much work for how much I'm getting paid. Everyone else who works here is so damn lazy. I even have people making jokes about how I'll do their work for them and they'll get paid for it.
Well, I can sympathize with you, but you have to understand, I can't just give you a raise. If I give you a raise, I'd have to explain to everyone why you got a raise and they didn't.
You could tell them it's because I'm doing half of their work for them while they look at stupid memes.
Oh, I'm sorry. It just wouldn't work out well.
Well, then are there any positions available above mine that I could apply for promotion to?
I don't think we can really look into a promotion this early into you working here. We would need time to properly evaluate your work ethic.
Seriously? You seriously just said that to me? I'm not about to break my back doing an entire office works for a company that doesn't give 2 craps about me. You and this entire office can go screw themselves. He walks out of the office, fuming mad, and yells, Hey, everyone! The boss just denied my raise, so no more leaving work early for any of you lazy crapheads. I quit. It was like a scene from Office Space, only in real life. Next story. We hire a lot of people in recovery who are a part of the drug court program under the condition that they'll be terminated if they go back to jail for drug or alcohol charges. This coworker was our hardest worker and always picked up shifts and got tons of compliments. So it really sucked when she relapsed and failed her P-test with the drug court. She got sent back to jail for a week and we had to fire her. I still kept in touch with her, and when I found out she was pregnant, I convinced my boss to hire her back. One last chance. I'm so happy I wasn't wrong, because she's about to celebrate her 4th year of sobriety, and now she's management. I was so scared it was going to be relapse number 2, and I'm thrilled it wasn't. These sorts of programs are absolutely huge to get people integrated back into society. It's hard for people who have been to jail. I don't have first-hand experience, but I've heard getting people back into normal life is so important. So, OP, shout out to your work, and shout out to you for wanting to give her another chance. I'm sure she appreciates it more than you could ever know. Next story. Had a great waiter, Robert. Dude could run circles around the entire staff. He knew the kitchen as well, could jump in at prep and assist if we got backed up, and still tend to his tables. The idiot put a $3 bottle of white Zinfandel in his backpack, right in front of a security camera, and while the owner was sitting at the bar eating. He was a student and working part-time. He had to be bringing in $300 to $500 in cash a week. Ooh, I am definitely going to get made fun of how I pronounced whatever that drink is. Zinfandel? Zinfandel? I don't know. Never heard of it before. Next story. Obligatory not me, but coworker. I joined the company a few months prior. Was still getting to know the various details of my job, and this guy was the star of the company. I spent as much time working with him as I could, honestly. I mean, he really was the freaking star. He was a solid programmer, great project manager, awesome account and customer management skills, and he had a knack for thinking outside the box on creative solutions. He loved working there, had rejected offers from Google, Facebook, and Pinterest. And then he banged the director's 16-year-old daughter. He was 31. Well, next story. He was one of my best weekend workers. Dependable, always on time, really good at his job. I got a call from management on July 4th saying, "We're gonna need to find a replacement for his name." I said, why? Did he find a better job? My management? No, he was arrested for murder last night. So, let's just say I didn't have the chance to fire him. I was dumbfounded when I got that call. Edit. Story time. So the story behind it is, A friend of the victim was worried when the victim wasn't answering calls or texts. She got in touch with the landlord of the facility expressing her concerns. They enter the apartment and find her face down in the bathroom with her wrists duct taped and duct tape around her mouth and nose. She was already dead by the time they got to her. The place had been rummaged through. Well, my employee lived right above her, and just by asking him simple questions about it, the police became suspicious of him, obtained a search warrant for his apartment. They found some of her clothing, along with a missing money jar of hers, as well as duct tape. He was arrested that night in front of a camera crew in his work uniform of all things. Now he's sentenced for the crime and is on watch for taking his own life in jail. It never came out what his motive was behind it. Probably the money jar they found in his apartment. Next story. Not me, but I was working in retail, and one of the customer service guys was being groomed for management. He'd been there for a while, was trusted to count money, and with the safe combination, opened if the managers couldn't, etc. He was a cool black guy. His race is important to the story, but a bit cocky and arrogant. My cousin also worked there, who was also cocky and arrogant. Anyway, my cousin put in his 2 weeks, but wasn't being a bad employee. My cousin didn't like the soon-to-be manager, because they were pretty similar in a lot of ways and they clashed because of it. On my cousin's last week, unprovoked, he approaches the guy and says, "You look like a big black fake dong." The guy walks up to my cousin, puts his finger to his head and says, "Do you have a problem with me?" It ended there with my cousin walking away. Then reporting, he was threatened because a finger made contact and he was fired. My cousin was a jerk and didn't regret it and laughed about it with my other friends who were also jerks. OP, sounds like you need new friends. And a new cousin? That seems harder to work out. Start with the friends, maybe. Next story. Obligatory happened to a coworker working at a bank. My branch had the biggest superstar in the state, always crushing sales numbers, and he generated more revenue than the rest of the branch combined. He set up a really big business account presentation, but his mother died literally on the day he was supposed to give the talk. Branch manager stepped in, held the presentation. The guy had built everything up. It was essentially a done deal. Branch manager just had to get a signature on the paperwork. Obviously, feeling bad for him, thinking he deserved the credit, they booked the deal under his name the next day. Technically, to get credit for a deal, you have to be there at signing. Both were fired within a week for sales manipulation. Next story. Work in retail. One of the staff from checkouts was amazing and would come up and help in our cafe constantly. She was fast, friendly with customers, and we would get so many compliments, and we asked if we could have her up here permanently. She stole a pen. Security had her on camera, and she was fired immediately. Edit. A pen was a fancy pen, packaged on shelf to be sold. She was right under the security camera stealing it. Security saw, told higher management, and I don't really think stealing, regardless what of, can just be ignored. I believe they probably did it to scare employees like, "This is what happens if you steal." Next story. I wasn't the manager, but we had a supervisor who was a rising star in the company, turned a struggling operation into one that was running well under budget and was generally easy to work with. We also had a mechanic who was a lazy sack of crap and nobody could ever find him. So one day the operations manager was looking at the security footage trying to figure out what the mechanic was doing one day and caught him selling pills out of his truck in the parking lot, so he called the police. When the police showed up, the mechanic was in his truck in the middle of selling drugs to the supervisor. They were both fired. The operation went from under budget to being $50,000 to $100,000 over for the next few months. Okay, so I'm not sure what kind of drugs these were, but all I'm saying is they seem to be kind of, working well. This is a joke. Just making that super clear. Don't do drugs, kids, or whatever. I'm not dare. Next story. Top manager for retail job I worked at lost her keys to the store that also had the keys to all the registers on the key ring. The registers started going short or would be empty aside from the change and dollar bills in the drawer. This went on for months. Corporate found out after installing a new set of security cameras overnight without her knowledge. She enlisted a group of sales associates to do most of the dirty work, but they found out she was the ringleader when they found out all the sales associates would bring her the stolen money and she would dole it out after taking her cut. Next story. Super talkative girl, really annoying, but was great on the phones. She caught on faster than anyone else at the job. The trainers were pretty impressed and there was a lot of butt kissing on their end. By the first month she's been there, she was already in the top 5 for sales. Problem was, she was a giant racist. She would have been totally fine if she kept her neo-Nazi lifestyle quiet, but she got in the mindset of, "They won't fire me. I'm the best they have at sales." So she got comfortable and let the casual And, not so casual, racism flow. It didn't help that the guy who sat next to her was a black guy from Spain and the girl behind her was Mexican. Next story. My dad had a guy working for him who was great, could work long hours, not complaining about being on call, etc. Well, he got caught screwing a nurse in his office. He got divorced and had a nervous breakdown and started threatening to end everyone. So they had to fire him and have him banned from the premises. And after that, we caught him hiding in the woods behind our house. Crazy guy. Oh, and he sued us for wrongful termination. Really dedicated, crazy guy. Edit. These guys were doctors who worked in the ER. He did get a settlement and the nurse sued him and the hospital for harassment and got a few cookies too. Funny thing is how common affairs are in hospitals. This idiot couldn't handle it. Next story. Scott was my riding buddy. We rode together everywhere on our motorcycles. I managed a small restaurant of a small chain, only 2 shops, but it was growing. When a night manager position opened, I gave it to him. He worked hard and was enthusiastic. A couple of years passed, now 5 locations. I was general manager and Scott managed the original location. We still rode everywhere, swapped girlfriends, played pool. Life was good. Scott began to miss rides we had planned because he was working. He really was a hard worker, tireless energy. I soon noticed he was working so hard because he was understaffed. His employee turnover rate was high. I initially thought it was because of the young employees that typically applied at that location, but there was more to it. I started spending more time around him and noticed he was, when he thought I wasn't looking, a tyrant boss to the kids who worked there. Kids left and he covered it up by working more himself. Overworked, he became exhausted and an even worse boss. I gave him some time off, sent in experienced employees, worked with him on training and communication. I thought he was absorbing it, but I got reports back that he was worse than ever. I sat and talked with him, a serious, job-threatening talk. He argued, said it was under control. I took his keys and handed him a box of his belongings. This is long ago, early 80s. As the recession wound down, I was able to find a better gig more suited to my skills and education. I heard from him a couple of times, usually looking for something, a fake recent reference, co-sign for a loan, etc. I don't do that for anybody. Last year, I got a sad call from him, saying he wished we had stayed in touch. We both still rode. Actually, he didn't still ride. He was calling from his deathbed, as cancer ate the last of him away. I have always felt it was my hiring him to a position he wasn't really ready for that started him down the road from being an enthusiastic, bright-eyed kid full of hope and integrity to the sad, narcissistic bill collector he became. Edit. Okay. I don't actually blame myself for the arc of his life. We're each responsible for our own choices. It's just that I can't help but feel that I missed something, some opportunity to steer him in a happier direction. Next story. Part of my job is to process expense reports from the sales department. I noticed one month that the top salesman had claimed a plane ticket expense twice, once when he booked it and then again when he took the flight months later. I reviewed his past expenses and noticed he was doing this regularly. When he booked the flight originally, he would claim the full amount of the ticket. Then, when he used the flight, he would claim each leg of the trip as a separate daily expense, so the receipt amounts wouldn't match so as to avoid detection. This is how I figured out he was doing it intentionally. I showed the evidence to the CFO and he was gone the next week. I only went back 3 years, but he stole about $10,000 over those 3 years. Next story. I managed a coffee shop / bakery. My best employee was this kid named Alexis. He was sharp and was quick to pick up on all the skills required to work in our fast-paced environment, but he was also someone who would stay out really late at night partying, and it would affect his attendance. One night in particular, he calls me up and tells me he's stuck in Baltimore. We live in DC, and he won't be able to make it in his shift for the following morning. He called me at 7 p.m. The last MARC commuter train leaves at 9:30 or so, and there's a free circulator that runs throughout the city. I used to visit Baltimore pretty regularly at the time because there was a girl I was seeing from up there. Anyway, I only had 1 day off a week and was working 14-hour days. It was the last straw in a series of no-call / no-show situations where he'd left me hanging for our busiest days. I called his phone that same night and told him that if he didn't show up for his shift on time the following morning, he was fired. He didn't show up, and I never saw him again. This was a few years ago, but I sometimes wonder what happened to him. He was a really sharp kid, but he did way too many drugs and wasn't quite as clever as he thought he was, so he would often get into trouble with police. Next story. Worked in a restaurant at a hotel chain. Management regularly found meaningless reasons to suspend various employees or cut hours. This one guy had been there for almost 13 years. Clients loved him, staff appreciated his presence, and he often came to the rescue of anyone requiring help. Everyone could depend on him, and he supported everyone. He had, like everyone in a restaurant, bumped heads with management now and again. You know, like everyone. In one particular season, they decided they were going to groom him in the eventuality to take on more responsibility. His position would eliminate his right to tips, but it came with insurance, a retirement plan, and steady pay. He had kids, was in his mid-40s. It all made sense why someone would take that job. He would, however, no longer be in the union. Fast forward to the day after his training is complete. The guy comes in with his management uniform and all. Some waiter calls in sick, and instead of him calling in another employee, he decides he was going to handle a few tables and the management responsibilities. At the end of the shift, the hotel manager summons the guy into his office. He's like the boss of his boss, and they fired him straight away. He was escorted out of the building, and our boss said there were strict rules, and management working tables harmed the hotel's image. It was complete BS. He had maybe taken 2 tables and split the rest amongst the staff. Basically, everyone agreed they promoted him just to get him out of the union to be able to fire him. A number of employees left shortly after for other various reasons. It was sort of a shaking up the status quo, and anyone who wouldn't fall in line would be shown the door. Today, that restaurant no longer exists. They closed down maybe 2 years later, rebranded the restaurant from American Steakhouse to Italian/French dining. New cooks, new waiters, and new management. It was just sort of the catalyst or the first domino. Next story. Not me, but a story from when I worked at Disneyland a long time ago in attractions, rides. The area manager loved this one particular cast member, employee. Like, this was the son he never had. This CM was promoted to lead on one of the roller coasters fairly quickly in his regime. One night, he was the lead on the closing crew, and the crew decided to ride after hours. Idiots that they are, they went without the lap bars down, and on one turn the ride is visible from the walkway. Even though the park was closed to guests, security was still in the park, and security saw the train go by with the CMs standing up through the turn. Security gets a hold of Theme Park 1, the manager in charge of the park for the night, who calls Attractions 1 to find out what's going on. Not surprisingly, every CM who was on the closing crew that night was fired. Unfortunately, so was the prodigal son, because he was the one who dispatched the train without the lap bars down. Next story. Amazing worker, but he just couldn't help but fish off the company pier. He had a relationship with a girl from accounting, but then they broke it off and she got bitter, started complaining about him daily, claiming harassment, unsafe workplace, yada yada. They let him go because of the threats of possible legal actions. Do not use your workplace to find girls. It does not work out well. I have got to agree here. Do not crap where you eat. That's just logic. These things should be separate for good reason. I'm not saying it can't work out, but I am saying if things do go wrong, and hey, sometimes they just go wrong, it's not going to be pretty. Next story. Managed a grocery store in the Midwest in the early 2000s. Had a great night stock guy that we'll call Juan, because that was his name. Got to know him a little bit since I'd occasionally have to stay and help the night crew stock since they were frequently understaffed. Juan was from Mexico, lived in a tiny apartment with his extended family, parents, siblings, an aunt and uncle, a few cousins, and a baby nephew and niece. And he worked 2 full-time jobs. So for 8 hours a night, he'd throw stock for me, then go work at a restaurant as a cook for 8 hours afterwards, then go home and nap for as long as possible before repeating it all over again. I had nothing but respect for Juan. He was my second best worker on night stock, always showed up on time, his output was quick and steady, and the man was scrupulously honest. One night he wanted a soda, but we had already closed the store/registers, so I told him to just get one out of the display case and pay for it later. He kept the receipt for 3 weeks until I saw him again, and made sure he showed it to me because he wanted me to know he did, in fact, pay for it. Anyway, after a few months on night stock, he asks me if we have any positions available during our open hours, because he missed being able to see his family and wanted a more normal schedule. We needed an extra person in the meat department, so I asked him if he would be interested in that. He said he would, so I had him sit down with the butcher for an interview. The butcher liked him, so we transferred Juan to the meat department. He did very well there, and the hours allowed him some more freedom, so it seemed like a great arrangement. here's where it goes bad. This was about a year after 9/11. So the new Homeland Security and Patriot Act laws were being enacted fast and furious. One side effect of this was background checks and the like were being conducted by everyone. So there was a backlog of requests. I get a notice from SSA that Juan's social security number wasn't valid. No big deal. Someone probably put a number in wrong somewhere. I call our HR and read the number he put on his application. No errors. I go and find Juan and double check it. As I thought, one number was off. I send it back to HR. A week later, I got a call from the HR director. She conferences in the regional AP guy. Apparently, Juan is not a citizen of our country. We need to terminate him immediately. I call Juan up to the office and let him know he's being let go. He's upset, but nods his head and leaves. He comes in a week later to pick up his last check, but there's no check for him. I call HR and find out that since he's not a legal citizen, we're withholding his pay until we hear back from INS. I have to tell him this as well. I don't know what happened to him after that. We did eventually pay him for his last week of work, but we ended up not paying out any of his vacation time, of which he had a fair amount, because of reasons I'm not very clear on. Next story. As the employee with the manager who clearly didn't want to fire me, it was because I was not going to join the owner's Scientology activities. At the firing interview, the owner's stooge, fellow Scientologist, and son-in-law tried for 20 minutes to come up with reasons I was personally responsible for getting fired. Every reason he floated for my, quote, bad performance was shot down by my own direct manager, whom I'd invited into the meeting as I suspected what it was. And get that, they weren't going to invite him to a meeting where his own direct managee was being dismissed. It was all shady as hell. Stuff like, Stooge CEO saying,
Well, I see here you have a lot of unfinished tasks.
direct manager, no, actually, everything on his to-do list is complete. Which, by the way, is why I thought I might be getting fired. I'd never had a clear to-do list. It went on like that until McStooge ran out of ideas. After all that, the Stooge then said,
Well, the industry's on a downturn, so we're downsizing and we have to lay you off.
Upside, left in excellent financial condition, took a year off to complete a major goal in the martial art I'd been studying, went to Japan and achieved the goal, and am now being courted by terrific companies with interesting and challenging work, none of which are owned by Scientologists. See, when you complain that a tiny company gives the entirety of its operational and expansion budget, about $1 million at the time, to Scientology, and thus suddenly can't pay people, it appears that that is called an industry downturn. Next story. Over 20 years of management experience. I've had to fire several great employees, and the main reason is because they upset the herd. They show up, and most other employees are negatively affected by their presence. They complain too much, exceed boundaries, gossip, instigate crap, or whatever. They know they're good and act bulletproof. I'll usually pull them aside and give them a warning. You know they're good and they care, but if they don't quit upsetting the herd, they'll soon be gone. Next story. I work at a store where we have to ask for donations for the charity we support at every transaction. We are in a competition with the other stores in the chain, and whichever store has the highest percentage of donations after 3 months get a bonus. Every employee, cashier or not, gets $100. Well, one of my assistant managers was awesome, always had the highest percent of donations per transactions and the highest dollar amount. She always did a great job in all other aspects of the job as well. Well, it turns out she was offering every customer her employee discount if they donated. So if someone spent around $500 and she gave them 30% off, they wouldn't at all mind donating 10 to 20 per transaction. Well, it came back from corporate what she was doing, and we had to let her go. Next story. Out of high school, I got a job at Arby's, and there was a guy who was pretty efficient at drive-thru and could run it by himself during lunch rush if he had to. Turns out during slow hours, he was skimming money by deleting orders after taking the money instead of completing the transaction. Managers estimated he did it for 3 to 6 months without getting caught, and took upwards of $2,000 to $3,000. They never pressed charges because he confessed. Edit. Almost forgot, he signed for the package and stole our team's Christmas bonus Walmart gift cards that were $25 each. I feel like usually if they say, oh, we're not going to press charges if you confess, that's a lie. And when you confess, it makes them easier to press charges, or makes it easier for them to press charges, I mean. This dude really just said, yeah, I did it, and they didn't do anything? I mean, all right then. That's Arby's decision, I think. Next story. This happened to me. I was told by the owner that I was the best salesperson. Then I texted a friend calling the owner a jerk. He was very rude to my fiancé. General manager, who hated my guts, asked the friend what happened. She then went and whined to the owner, OP said you're a jerk. You should fire her. So he did. Next story. Not me, but coworker. And I eventually, after he was fired, got promoted to what would have been his boss. But anyway, I worked overnight shifts for a server room at a university. Outside our supervisors, we were all student workers. This guy was pretty much the definition of overachieving kiss ass. Not really a jerk, just did whatever he could to look good to whoever he could. He was also not very good at his job, was pretty much on a definite path to full-time employment had he not screwed up supremely. One weekend, started Saturday morning, we had a cooling crisis. The AC units malfunctioned and server room got super hot. We turned off all redundant equipment to keep the temperatures as low as we could until we got the AC back to full capacity. These servers were intended to stay off until we knew we were in the clear. Under no one's authority but his own, on Sunday night, he went into the room and started to turn things back on. Ultimately, this caused no real problems, but he ended up being made an example of because this was a massive violation of policy, and if the cooling hadn't held up, he may have damaged equipment, or even worse. My boss tried to find an out for him, but ultimately they let him go because he made both of our server teams mad. Next story. We had a field tech that was awesome, probably the best I've ever seen or heard of. He was knowledgeable, skilled, and personable. He was always early, worked great under stress when things went south, and often finished jobs early. If we had off-hour issues, he was always available, and it seemed like he was in his truck and ready to get going right away. Well, it turns out he was always in his truck and ready to go. He had been living in his company truck for some time and just pulled off to the side of the road each night at a utility pole, climbed up, stole some cable TV, and set up shop for the night. We found that out and had to let him go. Oh, also the Coke and the ice. Really just have to be zero tolerance on these things, huh? No wiggle room at all? Dang. To be fair, I mean living out of the company van type thing. The drugs, you gotta do what you gotta do. And by what you gotta do, I mean fire him. Next story. Not me, but happened to someone I worked with. Very sweet lady, very nice. Couple of young kids. Always a good/hard worker and very motivated for a cashier. Well, we had a point of sale system that printed coupons for people based on what they bought after the transaction to be given with the receipt. She would ask people if they wanted them, and if they said no, she would pocket the ones she knew she would use. Loss prevention made an example of her. I mean, I get why they didn't want people doing that, but it was a new system at the time. They didn't have any rules against it. Next story. I didn't have to do the firing, but for whatever reason, my colleague had it in for this mid-level supervisor. She was a great trainer, did everything she was asked, took initiative, and then some. She was always well worth more than what she earned and had an absolute passion for the work. We worked with kids with autism. After a few months of having some vendetta against her, my colleague wrote her up, literally for, quote,
Being away from her desk too often.
Her uncle had recently been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and she was the only relative in town who could care for him. So the times she was away from her desk, she was stepping out to cry when she felt overwhelmed and didn't want people to see her cry. I found out after she was let go for this that she had informed the supervisors of this when her uncle was diagnosed, and that she was feeling very emotional about it and may need to take days off or take more frequent breaks to gather herself again and remain productive. Instead of showing compassion, my colleague used this as an opportunity to terminate her despite having no other red flags, no issues with feedback or performance. There was simply a personality difference, and she didn't gossip with the other supervisors. And this was all done with our other colleagues and supervisors' blessings. I don't work for this company after I found out about this. Okay, just how heartless do you have to be? Like, come on, be so for real. Why'd the company even find this was an actual problem if she was still doing a good job at work? Like, what? I don't understand office culture, man. Next story. Semi-relevant thing that happened to me. I wasn't the best employee, but I also wasn't the worst. I'd say second or third best out of 15. Lots of goobers working in that warehouse. I was young, 18 or 19, working in a third-party car parts warehouse. What we'd do is sell those parts to auto body shops so they can fix body damage to cars. So we stocked everything on the outside of cars/trucks. Fenders, hoods, bumpers, lights, door handles, etc. My job was to unload the C-cans from Korea we'd receive 3 times a week, add them into the inventory, tag them with the barcodes for our stocking system, and put them on the shelves without interrupting the guys doing the picking, filling out orders for the various car shops we supplied. I was the crap about this. I'd empty a C-can in one day to allow for the next shipment to come in. The following day would be a rush to put everything away and start unloading the next shipment. My method created a mess in my area as we unloaded faster than we could put the parts away, but it was organized as hell and I never failed to report missing stock or excess stock. All the while, the only time we had to pay fees for a container was the time someone unplugged the water pump for the loading bay which flooded and subsequently froze. I was never told about the water pump. I didn't know where the plug was, otherwise I'd have made sure it was always plugged in. I still ate crap for it, what the hell ever. The owner loved how efficient we were. I'd been there 11 months when I was let go. At 12 months, I was entitled to a $1 pay raise, putting me $1.50 above minimum wage. Instead of doing that, he put the guy he'd just hired and that I'd just trained in charge of unloading and fired me to save $1.50 an hour. The owner was a gigantic freaking a-hole. I'd heard the rumors about him, but thought it was the typical, my boss is a jerk shop talk. Nope, he was legit a cheap, lazy, gigantic jerk. Next story. Hardest working guy I knew. He would always come in early and pick up a shift if someone called in, and willing to learn everything. Turns out he stops in on his day off to get a slice of pizza, but he's drunk as crap. I mean, not a big deal in and of itself, but we were really busy and his work ethic took over. This guy, again, drunk as hell, gets behind the counter in a wife beater and starts trying to help customers. We politely asked him to leave, but he just wanted to help so bad that he got upset and caused a scene. Had to let him go for that. Super sad, but it turns out he has a really bad drinking problem. Next story. Was working for a rental company, and the top seller got fired after getting into it with the regional GM. I was good friends with him, the seller, not the GM, and so the GM was out for my blood. I kept records and was careful, but sure enough, I got hauled into the manager's office with the GM there to fire me. I asked for cause. He gave me a bunch of flimsy crap about my work and how I didn't complete the sales report properly. I responded calmly each time and showed him the paperwork. His response?
I don't care that you have an answer for everything. You're friends with the ex-employee, so you're fired.
My manager, after the GM left, came to my desk and apologized. Gave me a great reference letter. So now their top 2 salespeople were gone. I had a job that afternoon. There's no way that this was so high school as it sounds, right? Are you kidding me? There's no way he outright told you it was because you're friends with the guy he fired. That's ridiculous. I just don't believe it. The ego that some management has in this thread, man, horrifying. Next story. A few years back, working in returns. One girl always worked the morning shift because she knew no one else wanted to get up and be there by 7 a.m. Always on time, never called in sick, etc. Quick description to set the scene. Our returns department didn't handle cash. We would give vouchers that could be cashed out or used as credit, or did returns right to cards. Each return required the password of a security personnel to ensure the items being returned were, in fact, being returned. Returns over 90 days old could only be returned as a gift certificate and required a manager's password. Well, one day I come in and ask where she's at. It was busy, we needed another body for returns, and my manager tells me she's been in the GM's office for 2 hours. Thought to myself, that's weird, maybe they're promoting her. Nope. Turns out she was returning items off of 3+ month-old receipts paid with cash, then walking down to the cashiers and having them put the money on a gift card. She watched the managers and the security people put in their passwords, and while no one was around in the mornings, she would find high-dollar items and return them this way. She got over $25,000 in gift cards over the course of 2 years. Corporate was monitoring her doing it for a year before they called the cops. Last I heard, she didn't do any jail time, but she had to return all of the merchandise she purchased that way and is never allowed to set foot in the store again. Next story. He'd been at the company for 8 years before I became his manager. All of his reviews were 5-star. He was freaking awesome. So I wanted to see what his deal was because it was odd to have the one standout person. I shadowed him for 5-ish days. He was 100% on the level with his work. He did it all correctly and quickly. Satisfied? I just let it be. 2 weeks later, he's arrested and fired. He'd hidden several cameras in the ladies' bathrooms. Next story. There was a great post in one of the IT subreddits where the manager fired the best employee over some minor infraction because the manager didn't realize the employee's relative skill level. After the firing, it became apparent that the fired employee was doing the work of multiple people, and things subsequently fell apart. I wish I could find it. Anybody recognize the post from my description? Next story. Lots of not great stories here. I want to share a good one. I worked at a call center, and this guy was an awesome customer service rep. We provided support for Android devices. We had a non-compete clause with the client that stipulated any current employees and former employees had to wait 2 years before working for the client. When we lost the project, we moved to a different client, and we were a sales team. I found out that the client was hiring in-house support at twice the pay, and that if he wasn't rehirable, he would be exempt from the non-compete. So I talked to him about it and started fiddling with the performance report. In just 3 weeks, I was able to progress through our discipline steps to termination. He was fired, and then he contacted me on Hangouts to let me know he got his new job with a former client. It felt really good to help someone promote out of a fairly poor call center into a better role. Also, since more than 3 years had passed, he's now rehirable at the old place. Win-win. I feel like I gotta lock in more when I read these because I was so confused. Like, you guys have no idea. I was reading this like, you got him fired? You said it was a happy one. Is he supposed to be fired? Was he a jerk somewhere and I forgot? No. He got fired so he could get hired in a better job because the non-compete clause didn't apply if he wasn't rehirable at the old location. I got it, guys. Don't worry. Next story. So, not me, but related. Was doing some landscaping a while back for my landlord, and she mentioned how grateful she was because she had to let go of her last guy. She said she hated to do it because he was so good and worked so hard, and would just go from sun up to sundown and not take any breaks and just work like an animal. Turns out, he was tweaking balls the whole time, and eventually accidentally texted her asking if she had any crystal. Also found out I'm a really hard worker, but I don't hold a candle to a tweaker. Next story. Call center whose client was an insurance carrier. Rules are no cell phones on the call floor. We dealt with HIPAA and SSNs, so it was a total no-brainer. Not that hard of a rule, really. Best rep on my team, by far. Her call stats were awesome. She handled tough customers professionally, but that's the rule, and it's there for a reason. I look over one day and she's got a phone in her lap. I had to pull her from the call floor and issue a first and final warning. I let her know she's actually doing awesome, and while I get she's not stealing personal info, the rule is there and we all follow it, myself included. 2 weeks later, I look down at the row, and I see her with the phone in her lap again. Had to sit down, review that she already received a first and final warning, and we had to part ways. She burst into tears, and I felt bad about it, and letting her go did nothing good for my team stats. But that is one rule that's gotta stand, and it shouldn't be that hard to put your phone away and do your job. I do hope she found a good job after that. Truly, I do. Was a good kid. Next story. In grad school, I managed the coffee shop portion of the bookstore I worked at. I just got the job, and my first order of business was to fire the entire staff in the coffee shop. I was devastated. I'd just become friends with most of these guys and gals. One of the employees, let's call him Jim, had been manipulating the sales numbers so he could pocket money from the register every night. It was kind of brilliant in the scummy, stealing from the company kind of way. However, management was convinced that the whole staff was in on it but couldn't prove it other than Jim. They had hard evidence on Jim. Management called all the employees in one at a time and I had to ask them questions. Some were big. Did you see Jim doing this? To small. Have you ever not given a receipt to a customer? Once management felt like they had an answer that they could fire the employee with, they jumped in the conversation and cut them loose right there. One girl, Heather, was a fantastic worker, great with customers, always early, can come in if we need her, and busts her butt. She was fired too. I ended up hiring a great crew to replace them, but it felt crappy that first day. Next story. IT engineer worked for me. He was a weird guy, but incredible server engineer. He kept crap smooth, would let me know if problems were about to happen, and would come in on a second's notice. Someone found adult content on his computer. They reported it to me and HR. I fought for him. He went through the whole HR thing and had to take classes, but I saved his job. Then, one night, a night janitor caught him pleasuring himself to adult content on his computer and reported it. I had to fire him. Come on, man. OP fought so hard for you. They knew you were good and wanted to keep you around. And you were already caught for, essentially the same thing. Why are we doing this? Next story. This basically happened to me. Was working at Best Buy, on track to become a supervisor. I had a couple of good weeks where I had a couple customers talk to the GM about how great I was, which culminated in a weekend where 3 customers talked to him about me in the same day. GM sat me down and told me how awesome it was and gave me a merit raise, which never happens outside of the company's yearly evaluation raise. About a week later, the word came down from corporate about a bunch of layoffs. I got laid off because I was the least tenured in my department, with 5 years of experience. I don't think I understood it as a young adult, but the rest of my department was people trying to support a family, and looking back on it, I respect the guy for protecting the other staff who really needed that job more than I did. But at the time, I was just flabbergasted. Next story. Was a Domino's manager and had to fire my best driver. Not my best employee, strictly speaking, but an awesome driver. He kept coming to work with the 3-day beard growth, which looks like like crap. Domino's has a strict clean-shaven policy unless you have a well-established beard. No tolerance for being lazy and sloppy in appearance. I told him the first 2 times I would let it go, but he had to shave. The second time I let it go, I clearly told him if he ever showed up like that again, he would be sent home immediately, not allowed to clock in, suspended for the day, no pay, etc. Of course, he shows up one day and looks like crap. Immediately sent him home. He has the nerve to mouth off to me like it's no big deal, but once I told him what would happen, I always stick to what I say. He mouthed off a bit too much in front of the crew, busy on the weekends, and I had to fire him for the attitude and basically insubordination. Next story. As a more lighthearted one in here, I work at the YMCA, and many people come through our staff. It's nice enough for a minimum wage job, but not forever. A kid was smarter than everyone else on staff. She was good at her job, just finished her degree, was working while studying, and her passions were in a different field. So I talked with her about moving on, and she admitted to being scared about finding someplace else. After a while, we just fired her, and now she got hired at her dream job a week later. Good luck, Steph. OP didn't say it. I hope they mentioned why they were doing this. Like, surely you didn't just fire her out of nowhere like, you're doing a crap job. Because I don't think that would help her whole, like, being scared and lack of confidence and being a good worker kind of deal. So please tell me you told her, OP. Next story. She wasn't the best, but one of the best. University dining hall, about 100 employees, including student staff, temp staff from a local agency, and union staff. Had to get rid of her because she had a felony, credit card fraud. I was kind of shocked because she was so young, quiet, sweet, and a team player. But I also knew she was a young, single mom, likely from a poor background, and was probably desperate. But we work with some underage kids, so we had to let her go. Another top employee was also from the temp agency. She was such a team player and very efficient. It ended up that she was padding her hours on her timesheet, and us managers didn't catch it because we literally had about 100 other things to worry about other than to scrutinize her reported hours. Lesson learned. Next story. I was actually the employee. I used to work at a pizza place in college. My boss regularly told me I was the best employee she had. I knew every job in the store and could pick up slack at every station while doing my job. I got robbed while delivering, so I found another job. In addition to delivering, I would manage the store 2 Saturdays a month to help out the store manager and give her a weekend night off. She begged me to stay on for those 2 Saturdays, so I ended up staying. About 2 months into this agreement, I was closing the store. We would have a few pizzas with sauce and cheese on them ready to be topped and put in the oven. The night ends, and there are 3 of these pizzas left. I threw 2 in the trash and ran the 3rd through the oven and took it home. This was something I'd done many times, and my boss knew about it. Technically, we were supposed to pay for the pizza with our 50% discount, but it was basically garbage, so she didn't give a crap. Next day, I get a call.
Hey, OP, I'm really sorry, but I have to fire you. George, the owner, was watching the security cameras last night and saw you take a pizza without paying for it.
I actually felt bad for her. She sounded so dejected, and I knew it meant she would have to be working every Saturday until she found someone else who could actually run the shift well. She still gave me my employee discount when I would come in for about 2 years after that, until she moved to a different location. And why the hell was the owner watching the security cameras? Are you kidding me? OP, you are one unlucky son of a gun. I've never understood the whole, willing to waste food thing that companies do. I don't know if anyone could ever explain it to me in a way that I understand. I just simply don't. Anyway, that's the last story for today. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.